Tommy Chen pressed his face against the transport ship's window, watching as Nexus Station grew from a distant silver speck to an enormous structure that defied imagination. The space station's crystalline spires caught starlight and scattered it like countless diamonds, while massive energy fields shimmered in iridescent patterns around its rotating rings. All Human Exchange Program students, please prepare for docking procedures, announced a melodious voice through the ship's speakers. Tommy double-checked his safety harness, heart pounding with excitement. At 13 years old, he was about to become the youngest human to live among the Zarkanians. The docking procedure felt like floating through honey. Their ship passed through 3 layers of energy shields, each one humming with a different note that Tommy could feel in his bones. As they approached the final docking ring, he caught his first close-up glimpse of a Zarkanian ship. It resembled a sea creature made of living crystal, its hull almost transparent in places, revealing intricate machinery within. When the airlock finally opened, Tommy followed the other exchange students into the station. The artificial gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy and uncertain. A delegation of Zarkanians waited to greet them, their crystalline skin refracting light in mesmerizing patterns. Unlike the crude images Tommy had studied, the real Zarkanians were breathtaking. Their translucent outer layer shifted colors with their emotions, while geometric patterns flowed beneath their skin like living circuitry. "Welcome to Nexus Station, young scholars," said the lead Zarkanian, her skin rippling with formal blues and greens. "I am First Education Director Sillara. You have all earned your places here through exceptional achievement. We expect you to continue exceeding expectations." Tommy clutched his acceptance tablet tighter. He hadn't scored the highest on the technical tests. That honor belonged to Yuki from Japan, but his creative problem-solving scenarios had apparently impressed the selection committee. Looking around at the other human students, all teenagers between 15 and 17, he felt very small indeed. Their Zarkanian student guides arrived, each one's skin showing the deep purple of academic achievement. Tommy's guide, Kex, towered over him by at least 2 feet. "You are the small one who solved the cascade puzzle," Kex stated, geometric patterns swirling with curiosity. "Most interesting. Follow me to the education sector." As they walked through the station's main concourse, Tommy struggled to take everything in. Holographic signs floated in midair, automatically translating into dozens of languages. Atmospheric processors created localized environments for different species, visible as subtle distortions in the air. Most impressive were the floating gardens, entire parks suspended in zero-gravity fields, their plants growing in elegant spiral patterns. "Your living quarters are in Section 7 Delta," Kex explained, leading Tommy onto a gravity lift. "You will share common areas with Zarkanian students of equivalent academic standing. Mealtimes are determined by optimal nutritional scheduling. Recreation periods are allocated based on demonstrated academic performance." Tommy nodded, trying to memorize everything while maintaining his balance on the gravity lift. They passed several levels of what appeared to be markets, where Zarkanians and other alien species traded goods. He noticed that everyone moved with purpose. No one seemed to be simply wandering or relaxing. The education sector looked like a cross between a crystal palace and a supercomputer. Walls displayed constant streams of data, while study pods hung from the ceiling like high-tech cocoons. Several Zarkanian students turned to observe Tommy, their skin patterns shifting to display varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. "Your first evaluation begins tomorrow," Kex announced as they reached Tommy's quarters. "Achievement metrics will be monitored continuously. Remember, your presence here reflects on your species' potential." As the door slid shut behind him, Tommy sat on his bed and took a deep breath. The room was sparse but elegant, with walls that could become transparent to show the stars outside. He pulled out the small photo of his family and placed it on the floating bedside shelf, watching as the shelf's crystal surface adapted to securely hold the Earth object. "Well," he whispered to himself, Time to show them what humans can do. 3 weeks into his stay on Nexus Station, Tommy discovered that even perfect societies cast shadows. He found this out during his designated exploration period, earned through high marks in his quantum mathematics assessment. While other students used their free time to study in the crystal archives, Tommy preferred to wander the lesser-traveled corridors of the massive station. The maintenance sector was different from the pristine upper levels. Here, the crystal walls were duller, their natural luminescence dimmed by years of accumulated space dust. Service drones hummed quietly as they went about their tasks, paying no attention to the young human who watched them with fascination. "Your allocated exploration time is better spent in the achievement centers," commented Kex, who had been assigned to monitor Tommy's activities. The tall Zarkanian's skin rippled with patterns of mild disapproval. "These sectors hold no academic value." Tommy was about to respond when he noticed movement in a shadowy alcove near the hydroponics junction. At first, he thought it was another maintenance drone, but the figure was organic, huddled small against the crystal wall. As his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light, he made out the form of an elderly Zarkanian woman. Her crystalline skin was clouded and dull, lacking the brilliant patterns that marked other members of her species. Her clothes, though clean, were worn and patched. She sat perfectly still, watching the occasional passerby with eyes that seemed to hold depths of starlight. "A genetic non-achiever," Kex stated flatly, geometric patterns showing distaste. "Come, we should not waste time here." But Tommy had already reached into his bag, pulling out the lunch he had packed for his exploration period. His mother had always taught him to bring extra food on adventures, saying you never knew who might need it. He approached the elderly woman, holding out half of his sandwich. "Hello," he said softly, using his best Zarkanian pronunciation. "Would you like to share my lunch?" The woman's eyes met his, and Tommy caught his breath. Despite her worn appearance, her gaze held an intensity that reminded him of his grandmother back on Earth. Her skin patterns, though faint, shifted in a complex way he had never seen before. "A human child," she said, her voice carrying an unexpected musical quality. "How interesting that you see me, when so many look past." Behind him, Tommy heard the disapproving clicks of several Zarkanian students who had stopped to watch. Their skin patterns swirled with a mixture of confusion and disdain. "The human wastes time on refuse," one of them commented. "Perhaps his species lacks proper achievement metrics." Tommy ignored them, sitting cross-legged in front of the woman. "I'm Tommy," he said, still holding out the sandwich. "My mom makes these with special bread that's good for space travel." The woman's clouded skin sparkled faintly as she accepted half of the sandwich. "You may call me Mira," she replied. "Tell me, Tommy, why does a young human bring food on his adventures?" As they shared the simple meal, Mira told him stories about the station's early days. She spoke of the first crystal spires, grown from seeds brought from the Zarkanian homeworld, and of the ancient gardens that once floated in the zero-gravity sectors. Her words painted pictures more vivid than any historical text Tommy had studied. "The human contaminates himself with failure," Kex announced to the growing crowd of student observers. "His achievement metrics will suffer." But Tommy barely heard them. He was lost in Mira's tale of the station's first light festival, when thousands of crystal ships had danced among the stars. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke, and for a moment, Tommy thought he saw complex patterns shifting deep beneath her clouded skin. When his exploration period ended, Tommy promised to return. As he walked away, the whispers of his classmates followed him like shadows. "How disappointing," they murmured. "He showed such potential." Tommy smiled to himself, patting his bag where he had already packed an extra sandwich for tomorrow. Sometimes, he thought, the most important achievements couldn't be measured at all. Tommy began spending every free period he earned with Mira in their quiet corner of the maintenance sector. The elderly Zarkanian never seemed to leave her alcove, yet she spoke of the station's distant corners as if she had walked them yesterday. Each visit revealed new layers to her mysterious knowledge. "See these crystal patterns in the wall." Mira traced her finger along what appeared to be ordinary maintenance crystals. They're actually navigation markers, left by the original builders. Each intersection tells a story, if you know how to read them. Tommy leaned closer, squinting at the geometric shapes. They look like the patterns under Zarkanian skin, he observed, pulling out his tablet to take notes. His Earth Studies teacher had encouraged him to document his experiences on the station. Very observant, young one. Mira's clouded skin sparkled briefly. Our ancestors shaped these halls to mirror their own bodies. The station lives and breathes as we do, though few remember this now. His tablet chimed with a message from Kex. Your achievement scores show decline. Recreation period allocation may be reduced. Tommy sighed, closing the notification. His technical scores had dropped slightly, but his Earth Studies reports about station life had become surprisingly popular back home. They don't understand, he confided to Mira, sharing his latest batch of sugar cookies from home. Everyone here is so focused on measuring everything. But some things can't be measured, right? Mira's laugh sounded like wind chimes. Tell me, what do you see when you look at this section of wall? She gestured to a seemingly blank crystal surface. Tommy studied it carefully. After weeks of listening to Mira's stories, he had begun noticing subtle details others missed. There's a pattern, like ripples in water, and those darker lines look like they're pointing somewhere. Navigation markers to the old emergency systems, Mira confirmed, hidden in plain sight, yet invisible to those who believe they already know everything worth knowing. A group of Zarkanian students passed by, their skin patterns displaying academic achievement colors. One of them, Silara, paused to address Tommy. Your dedication to waste is remarkable. Perhaps you could channel such persistence toward useful pursuits. Tommy noticed how their colors shifted to confusion when Mira spoke, her voice carrying an authority that seemed at odds with her appearance. Young achievers, can you read the story written in these walls? The students glanced at the crystal surface dismissively. There is nothing to read, Zilara stated. These are standard maintenance crystals, grade 3 efficiency rating. Then perhaps, Mira suggested gently, your education has blind spots. After the students left, Tommy shared a fresh cookie with Mira. You know so much about the station. Were you here when it was built? Mira's eyes twinkled mysteriously. Let me tell you about the day of first light, when the crystal spires first sang to the stars. Her voice took on a melodic quality as she described massive crystal ships arranging themselves in complex patterns, their combined energy creating the station's first artificial sunrise. As Tommy listened, he noticed something extraordinary. The seemingly dull crystals around them had begun to pulse with a faint light, responding to Mira's words. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable, like a heartbeat in the walls. The station remembers, Mira whispered, her clouded skin momentarily showing deep, complex patterns. It remembers everything, waiting for those who care enough to listen. Tommy added this observation to his notes, knowing his Earth Studies report would intrigue his readers back home. He didn't mention the growing suspicion in his heart that Mira was far more than she appeared to be. As his allocated time ended, Mira gave him a gentle smile. Tomorrow, young one, I shall tell you about the hidden gardens. Some say their crystals still hold songs from the homeworld. Tommy packed up his tablet, already excited for the next day's stories. Behind him, the wall crystals pulsed once more, a farewell pattern that only he and Mira seemed to notice. The first warning came as a subtle flicker in the crystal walls. Tommy noticed it during his quantum physics lecture, a momentary dimming that made the Zarkanian instructor's skin patterns appear dull. None of his classmates seemed to react, but Tommy had spent enough time studying the station's crystal patterns with Mira to know something was wrong. Structural integrity remains within acceptable parameters, the instructor stated, though her skin showed ripples of concern. Please continue your calculations. Tommy's tablet suddenly flashed with emergency notifications. The station's main computer network was experiencing unexplained failures. Climate control systems in several sectors had begun malfunctioning. Most worrying were the reports of power fluctuations in the life support crystals. All students returned to their quarters immediately, announced a station-wide alert. This is not a drill. Repeat, all students returned to their quarters. The halls filled with confused students and staff, their skin patterns creating a dazzling display of anxiety and fear. Tommy started toward his quarters, then stopped. Something about the crystal wall's pulsing pattern seemed familiar, like a story Mira had told him about the station's early days. The station remembers, he whispered to himself, recalling Mira's words. Without thinking further, he turned and ran toward the maintenance sector. Human student Chen, you are moving in an unauthorized direction. Kex's voice came through his tablet. Return to your assigned safety zone immediately. Tommy ignored the command, racing through corridors that were growing darker by the minute. The maintenance sector's usually dim lighting had failed completely, leaving only the faint emergency strips to guide his way. He could hear the distant sound of crystal supports groaning under stress. Mira, he called out, reaching their usual meeting spot. The alcove was empty. Fear gripped his heart. Had she been evacuated with the others? Or was she still here somewhere, possibly trapped in the failing station? A pattern caught his eye, one of the navigation markers Mira had taught him to read. In the emergency lighting, it seemed to point deeper into the maintenance sector, toward areas he had never explored. Human Chen, your behavior is being recorded as a serious violation, his tablet warned. Tommy turned it off and stuffed it in his pocket. Following the ancient markers, he ran deeper into the station's core. The crystal walls here were different, older with patterns so complex they made his eyes water. The air grew colder as life support systems continued to fail. A sound echoed through the darkness. Crystal chimes, like the ones Mira had described from the day of first light. Following the sound, Tommy rounded a corner and froze in amazement. Before him stood a massive crystal door, its surface alive with swirling patterns. Next to it stood Mira, her previously clouded skin now gleaming with intricate geometric designs that put even the highest-ranking Zarkanians to shame. I knew you would understand the signs, young one, she said, her voice carrying new authority. The station chose well in calling you here. The station called me, Tani asked, breathless from running. It recognizes those who care enough to listen, Mira explained. Something is attacking our core systems, something that knows our modern defenses, but it doesn't know about this place. She placed her hand on the crystal door, which resonated with a deep harmonic tone. This is the original control center. From before we believed we had outgrown our ancestors' wisdom. Only someone who understands both the old ways and the new has any hope of saving us now. Tani looked at the ancient console beyond the door, then at his modern tablet, like combining your stories with today's technology. Mira's eyes sparkled with approval. Precisely. Shall we begin? Behind them, the station's modern lighting failed completely, leaving them in darkness broken only by the ghostly glow of ancient crystal patterns that had waited centuries to be needed again. The ancient control center hummed to life as Mira pressed her palm against its crystalline surface. Streams of light flowed from her touch, racing through patterns that had lain dormant for centuries. Tommy watched in awe as her previously clouded skin blazed with royal geometries, designs he had only seen in historical documents about the imperial family. The security networks are compromised, Mira said, her voice carrying the weight of command. Someone has introduced a quantum virus into our modern systems, but they don't know about this place. She turned to Tommy, her eyes reflecting the dancing lights. They don't know that a human child remembered the old stories and saw what everyone else had forgotten. Tommy pulled out his tablet, its screen flickering as the station's power fluctuated. The patterns in the walls, they're not just navigation markers, are they? They're backup systems. A small smile crossed Mira's face. When I chose to disappear, to live among my people as one forgotten, I never expected a human child would be the one to understand what we had lost. Her skin patterns shifted, forming the unmistakable imperial crest. I am Queen Mirandella the Ninth, and you, Tommy Chen, have helped me protect my people by simply being kind enough to listen." Tommy's mind raced through every interaction they'd had. The strange authority in her voice, her deep knowledge of the station's history, the way the crystals responded to her presence. It all made sense now. But why hide? Why live in the maintenance sector? "Because I discovered something troubling," the Queen explained, her hands dancing over the ancient controls. "Our society's obsession with measurable achievement was being used against us. Those who ranked systems began manipulating the metrics, ensuring their children always scored highest, their families always received the best positions." Holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing the virus's spread through the station's networks. The Queen continued, "When I questioned this, certain powerful families decided it would be better if I retired. They thought they had trapped me in the lower sectors, never imagining I would find allies in the old systems, and in a human child who saw value in helping those society had cast aside." Tawny connected his tablet to one of the crystal interfaces, watching as ancient and modern code began to interact. The virus is targeting the achievement ranking systems, he realized. It's trying to rewrite everyone's scores, but it's affecting life support as a side effect. Precisely. The Queen's skin patterns shifted to battle configurations that hadn't been seen in generations. They thought to create chaos, blame it on system failure, and emerge as saviors with their own improved ranking systems. But they didn't count on us. Together, they worked at the ancient console. Tommy's modern tablet translated the old command structures, while the Queen's touch activated systems that had been sleeping for centuries. Through the crystal walls, they could hear the station groaning as power fluctuated between sectors. "There," Tommy pointed at his screen. "The virus is using the main data streams, but the old crystal networks run on completely different protocols. We can use them to quarantine the infected systems." The Queen's hands flew over the controls. "Direct the emergency power through the original grid. The patterns you learned to read, they're not just markers, they're data conduits. Together, we can reroute station control through paths these saboteurs never knew existed." A deep resonance built in the crystal walls as ancient systems awakened fully. Tommy felt the frequency in his bones, like the heartbeat of the station itself. Above them, lights began to stabilize as sector after sector was reclaimed from the virus. "Station security will be here soon," the Queen said, her royal patterns now shining clearly. "They'll have many questions. Are you ready, young Tommy Chen, to help me teach our people what you helped me remember? That true achievement lies not in rankings and metrics, but in the wisdom to see value in every person." Tommy stood straighter, proud to stand beside her. "Ready, Your Majesty." Emergency lights pulsed crimson through the ancient control center as Tommy's fingers flew across his tablet screen. The Queen worked beside him, her crystalline skin radiating royal patterns that interfaced directly with the station's original systems. Time was running out. They could hear the distant sound of crystal supports groaning under the strain of fluctuating power fields. "The virus is adapting," Tommy said, watching as red warning indicators spread across his display. "It's learning from our countermeasures." His tablet chimed with another emergency alert. Life support was failing in the residential sectors where students and families lived. The Queen's hands danced across the ancient console, leaving trails of light in their wake. "The old systems are holding, but we need to do more than just contain the damage. We must eliminate the virus entirely." Her royal patterns flared with determination. "Tommy, what do you see in these data streams?" Tommy studied both his modern display and the crystalline readouts. Mira, no, the Queen, had taught him to look beyond the obvious, to see patterns others missed. The virus keeps trying to access the achievement ranking systems, but it's hitting the environmental controls instead. Maybe. An idea struck him. Maybe we can use that. He connected his tablet directly to the ancient crystal interface, creating a bridge between old and new technologies. "Your Majesty, can you route all the ranking system traffic through the old emergency protocols?" The Queen's eyes sparkled with understanding. Ah, clever child. The virus will follow its target. Her fingers traced complex patterns on the crystal surfaces. The walls hummed with power as century-old systems awakened fully. Tommy's tablet suddenly blazed with activity. It's working. The virus is chasing the ranking data into the old networks. But these systems operate on completely different principles. It can't understand the crystal-based protocols. Through the control center's monitors, they watched as sectors began stabilizing. The virus, trapped in ancient pathways it couldn't comprehend, began breaking down. The Queen's hands moved in a final, complex gesture, and waves of purifying energy pulsed through the station's crystal matrix. "Security forces approaching," announced a synthetic voice. "Multiple teams converging on this location." The Queen stood regally, her once-hidden royal patterns now shining at full brilliance. "Let them come. It's time my people remembered who they are, and what they almost lost." The massive crystal doors slid open. Station security forces rushed in, weapons ready, then froze at the sight before them. Their skin patterns rippled with shock as they recognized the royal geometries they had learned about only in historical documents. "Your Majesty." The security chief dropped to one knee, his crystalline skin shifting to formal patterns of submission. We thought you were dead, retired, hidden away." The Queen's voice carried centuries of authority. "I chose to walk among my people, to understand what we had become, and in doing so, I found both corruption and hope." She placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. This human child saw value in helping someone society had cast aside. His kindness gave him an ally that no achievement metric could have predicted. Tommy's tablet displayed the final damage report. The virus was completely neutralized. The station's systems were restoring to normal, with both ancient and modern networks now working in harmony. The faction responsible for this attack believed they could control our society through manipulated achievement rankings, the Queen announced to the growing crowd of security officers. They forgot that true achievement cannot be reduced to numbers alone. She turned to Tommy with a warm smile. Young Tommy Chen demonstrated that wisdom comes in many forms, and that kindness may accomplish what pure efficiency cannot. "Now shall we go show my people what they have forgotten?" Tommy stood tall beside her, his tablet interfaced with the ancient crystals, a bridge between two worlds. Together, they walked from the hidden chamber into a station forever changed. The great assembly hall sparkled with the light of 10,000 crystal matrices as Queen Mirandala addressed her people for the first time in 7 years. Tani watched from a special seat near the royal platform, still amazed by how different she looked in her ceremonial robes compared to the humble garments she had worn in the maintenance sector. "My people," the Queen's voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "We have forgotten something precious in our pursuit of perfection." The crystal walls pulsed in harmony with her words, displaying images of her time living among the station's forgotten citizens. "We believed we could measure worth through numbers alone. We were wrong." Screens throughout the hall showed security footage from the past weeks. Tommy sharing his lunch, listening to stories, learning the ancient crystal patterns that had ultimately helped save the station. The Queen's skin patterns shifted to emphasize key moments, drawing gasps from the assembled Zarkanians as they recognized their own behaviors reflected back at them. "This human child saw value where we saw nothing," she continued. "He showed kindness when our systems said it was inefficient, and in doing so, he gained knowledge that our highest-ranking students had forgotten existed." In the audience, Tommy noticed his former classmates' skin patterns shifting with complex emotions. Zilara, who had once mocked his waste of time, now displayed patterns of deep reflection. Kex, his former monitor, showed geometries of reconsidering long-held beliefs. The Queen activated a crystal display showing the station's original blueprints. "Our ancestors built this station with both technology and wisdom. They understood that true achievement cannot be measured by metrics alone. The recent attack on our systems exposed not just corruption in our rankings, but a flaw in our thinking." Tommy's tablet chimed softly, Messages poured in from Earth as the broadcast reached his home planet. His family, his teachers, and millions of others watched as the Queen explained how ancient wisdom and modern innovation had combined to save the station. Therefore, the Queen announced, "I am implementing the first light reforms." The crystal walls shimmered with new energy. Achievement will no longer be measured solely by test scores and productivity metrics. We will add new criteria: creativity, compassion, wisdom, and the ability to see value in unexpected places. The hall erupted with discussions, skin patterns creating a dazzling display of surprise, uncertainty, and hope. The Queen raised her hand for silence. To begin these reforms, I have created a new position: Bridge Builder. She gestured to Tommy. Young Tommy Chen will help us establish programs that combine Earth's understanding of emotional intelligence with our technological advancement. Tommy stood, his heart pounding as thousands of crystalline faces turned toward him. The Queen's next words made him smile. His first proposal was quite simple. Every student will spend time helping in the maintenance sectors, learning from those we once overlooked. After all, her skin patterns shifted to show amusement. You never know when the person you help might be a queen in disguise. Laughter rippled through the hall, accompanied by shifting patterns of understanding. Tommy saw several of his former classmates already discussing ways to implement the new programs, their skin showing patterns of enthusiasm he'd never seen during their academic competitions. As the assembly continued, Tommy received another message on his tablet, this one from the Earth Exchange Program directors. They wanted to expand the program, inspired by how one young human's simple acts of kindness had helped transform an entire society. The Queen concluded her address by activating the station's original light matrix. The crystal walls blazed with patterns not seen since the day of first light, creating a display of breathtaking beauty that combined ancient artistry with modern precision. "Let this be our new beginning," she declared, "where achievement is measured not just by what we accomplish, but by how we help others achieve as well." Tommy touched the crystal wall nearest to him, feeling its warm response. The station was changing, awakening to new possibilities, just like its people, and he was going to help build that future, one act of kindness at a time. 3 months after the Queen's return, Tommy stood in the newly renovated maintenance sector, watching as Zarkanian students helped repair crystal matrices alongside the maintenance crew. The once dim corridors now sparkled with renewed energy, every surface showing the beautiful patterns he had first learned to see during his lunches with Mira. "Bridge Builder Chen," called out a familiar voice. Zilara approached, her skin patterns showing the new harmony geometries that had become popular among young Zarkanians. "The first group of Earth Exchange students arrives tomorrow. We've prepared everything according to your suggestions." Tommy nodded, checking his tablet where he documented all the lessons learned from his own experience. Remember, they might do things differently than expected. That's not a flaw, it's an opportunity to learn. The station had changed dramatically in the past months. The rigid achievement hierarchies had been replaced by a more balanced system that valued diverse forms of intelligence and contribution. The old crystal networks now worked in perfect harmony with modern technology, just as the station's people were learning to balance efficiency with empathy. "Your transport to Earth departs in 3 hours, Zilara reminded him. "The celebration committee is waiting in the Great Hall." Tommy took one last look at the maintenance sector. The alcove where he had first met the disguised Queen now bore a crystal plaque. "Kindness reveals what achievement metrics miss." It had become a popular spot for students to gather and share stories. In the Great Hall, hundreds of Zarkanians waited to bid him farewell. The Queen stood on the central platform, her royal patterns bright, but still showing traces of the simpler geometries she had worn as Mira. Beside her stood Kex, now serving as the head of the new Cultural Integration Department. "Young Bridge Builder," the Queen addressed him formally, though her eyes twinkled with the same warmth he'd known in the maintenance sector. "You came to us seeking to learn, but became our teacher instead. What final wisdom would you share before returning home?" Tommy looked out at the assembled crowd. His former classmates, the maintenance crew members who were now respected instructors, and the new generation of students who would never know the rigid hierarchies of the past. Back on Earth, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal-enhanced acoustics, we have a saying. The best way to measure a society is by how it treats those who can offer nothing in return. But I learned here that everyone has something to offer, if we're willing to look past the surface. The crystal walls pulsed with approval, the station itself seeming to endorse his words. The Queen activated a special display, showing statistics from the past 3 months. Problem-solving efficiency had increased by 40% since the integration of maintenance sector wisdom, while student satisfaction and innovation metrics had reached all-time highs. Your initiatives will continue, the Queen assured him. The Bridge Builder program has already selected candidates from 12 different species. Each will bring their own perspective on what achievement truly means. Tawny's tablet chimed with one final update. The Earth Exchange Program had been renamed the Bridge Builder Initiative, with hundreds of schools applying to participate. His simple act of sharing lunch with a stranger had sparked changes nobody could have predicted. As he prepared to board his transport, Tommy received farewell messages from across the station. The maintenance crew had prepared a special crystal, programmed with their stories. His former classmates had created a documentary about the station's transformation. Even the ancient control center had produced a unique pattern sequence in its honor. The Queen's final words stayed with him as his ship departed. You taught us that true achievement lies not in rising above others, but in helping others rise. Your kindness showed us what our metrics had missed, that the greatest strength lies in lifting each other up. Through the transport's window, Tommy watched Nexus Station shine like a jewel against the stars. Its crystal spires no longer just displayed achievement rankings, but also pulsed with stories of kindness, wisdom, and connection. He had arrived seeking to learn from an advanced civilization, only to help them rediscover their own humanity.